You know that feeling when you're watching a film and everything about it is just perfect? The acting, the cinematography, the raw emotion, it all comes together to create something truly extraordinary. That's exactly how I felt watching Me, Captain. For most of its runtime, I sat at the edge of my seat, completely immersed in the story. But then something happened that pulled me right out of the experience, a plot point so unbelievable that it almost undermined everything that came before it. But let me back up for a moment. Me, Captain follows two teenage cousins from Senegal, dreaming of making it big in Europe. Director Matteo Garrone takes us on their harrowing journey from the streets of Dakar, through the merciless Sahara Desert, and toward the treacherous Mediterranean Sea. The film is brutal in its honesty, yet beautiful in its humanity. I found myself having to pause several times, not because of gratuitous violence, but because of its devastating authenticity. Throughout their journey, we witness moments of surreal beauty. Our protagonist encounters the ghost of a woman who died in the desert, and later, an angel. These supernatural elements work brilliantly as metaphors for the psychological coping mechanisms of those facing unimaginable hardship. They give us insight into the mental state of someone experiencing severe trauma. But then we reach that moment, the scene that made me question everything. Our young protagonist, barely 17, is suddenly thrust into the position of captaining a boat carrying 250 people across the Mediterranean Sea. As I watched this unfold, my suspension of disbelief shattered. How could anyone expect us to accept this plot development? It felt like a step too far, a dramatic liberty that betrayed the film's commitment to realism. And this is where things get interesting. This discovery made me completely rethink my assumptions about artistic license in cinema. When do we need to adjust reality to make it more believable? And when should we let the raw truth speak for itself, even if audiences might struggle to accept it? You see, this unbelievable plot point, it actually happened. The film is based on the true stories of two individuals, Fana Amara, who really did captain a boat across the Mediterranean at just 15 years old, and Mamadou, whose journey through the Sahara and Libya informed the first part of the film. As both a viewer and a director, this put me in an interesting position. We've all been there. That moment in a film where something happens that just doesn't sit right. Not because it's poorly executed, but because it stretches credibility too far. That's exactly what I felt during the sequence near the film's end, where smugglers employ a 17-year-old boy to drive their boat to Italy. Here I was, criticizing what I thought was an unrealistic plot choice, only to discover it was completely true. It made me wonder, if I had directed this film, how would I have handled this revelation? How do you convince an audience to believe something extraordinary, even when it really happened? The smuggler's cruel logic becomes clear when you understand the context. As laws became stricter and smuggler boat drivers faced decades in prison, they turned to recruiting migrants, often teenagers, to pilot their boats. It's a calculated choice. If the film had explained that younger captains face lighter sentences if caught, we as an audience could better understand the cruel logic behind why smugglers choose teenagers. Looking at it from a director's perspective, there were several ways this crucial revelation could have been made more believable. The film could have shown us more of the mounting pressure as departure date approached, and no experienced drivers stepped forward. It could have better explained why smugglers specifically target teenagers. We could have seen a more realistic power dynamic on the boat, with adults helping our protagonist rather than immediately deferring to him. The vessel itself raises questions. It's a one-way transport that the smugglers will lose, yet it's surprisingly well-functioning. A smaller, more visibly deteriorated boat would better fit the disposable nature of these operations. And most importantly, we needed to see how this impossible choice emerged gradually rather than appearing suddenly. Me, Captain stands as a reminder that truth can indeed be stranger than fiction. And here's something that puts this entire discussion in perspective. In interviews, Garrone revealed he had to trim down significant parts of the real story. The violence against women in detention centers, the abuse of children, these real horrors were deliberately left out of the final cut. The reality of migration routes through Africa is even harsher than what we see in this unflinching film. Want to dive deeper? Check out the full analysis in the pinned comment below.